Hi, my name is David Parnes, and I just paused from the protests here to explain to you in a few words what's going on in Israel these days. So I understand that you've been touring Israel for the last few days, and hopefully you've been witnessing the miracle of Israel and have a basic understanding of what we were able to create in this wonderful country. Some term this, startup nation, in light of all the wonderful startups that basically were established and prospered here. But Israel is a startup nation on itself for another reason, because it itself is a startup, is a wonderful project, a country that was established just like a company with very limited resources, very little capital, and we've been able to create a true miracle. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, without going into figures and without going into specific companies that we produced or science or literature, Israel is the only country that ever went from being a third world country to becoming a first world country. Again, from third to first, the only country in the world. Now that's impressive. But what's even more impressive is that it went from third world country to first world country in only one generation. And why is that? Well, because we basically knew how to deploy our resources intelligently. Our only resource is really our brain power, our manpower, and our free thinking, our incredible way of thinking outside of the box. Nothing is impossible. Everything is doable. What helped us in creating this wonderful startup or developing it further is a very strong sentiment of social cohesion. Everybody has a pioneering sentiment wired into him, and together we have one common goal. We want to make Israel happen. We want to improve ourselves, we want to improve our communities, and we want to improve our country. So that is about Israel in general. Now, let's talk about government. Israel was established in 1948 as a parliamentary democracy. This means that we have one parliament. We don't have two parliaments. This also means that we have three branches of government, but really only two. We have a judiciary, we have parliament, and we have the executive. But since the executive controls the parliament, we really have two, the judiciary and parliament / the executive. We do not have a constitution. The reason being, as a startup, we hit the ground running. We did not pause to write a constitution, to think about a constitution. We started, but too many quibbles, we didn't have time, too many other things to deal with, as in any startup, and we continued onward. Essentially, we all felt we knew what a democracy is. Democracy, a bit like pornography. You can't always define it, with certainty, but you recognize it once you see it. So we all felt we knew what democracy was, and we continued establishing the country. Fast forward a few decades, 2023, and we have a new government that is elected. An old premier who is elected once again, Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu has three indictments are brought against him. Okay, he's on trial for severe corruption, and Benjamin Netanyahu has one goal. He does not intend to serve term. He will not go to jail. And unlike other premiers, other officials, other ministers, he does not step down. Okay, and he remains in office. He decides to remain in office, and remaining in office, he basically uses a very simple tactic. He starts a campaign, an anti-judiciary campaign, to crush the country's or the citizens' confidence in the judiciary. The elections come. He's elected once again, minority, and 24% vote for him. But he does create a coalition. He does not create a coalition with the center parties, the parties that have more common goals. He creates a coalition with two other constituents. One is the ultra-religious, which we call the Haredim. Haredim can be loosely translated to the fearful of God. And those fearful of God have one goal. They want to continue staying as they are, aside, away from society. They do not want to be productive. They do not want to serve in the military. They are about 15% of society now. A worrying 50% that is only growing. And they want to make sure that they do not have to serve in the military, they do not have to work, and that they will continue to be funded by us, the working part of society. That is their goal. So we have Netanyahu, who does not want to sit in jail. We have the Haredim, the fearful, who want to remain untouched and sponsored. And we have a third group that joins forces with this coalition, which are the Messianics. The Messianics operate under different names, and they have various parties. But at the core, what do these Messianics want? They want the Messiah to come, and essentially for the Messiah to come, Israel has to return to biblical times. I cannot explain to you what this means except being a racist and being ignoramus. The best way I can portray this to you is think Taliban, okay? Think ISIS. So we have Taliban, ISIS, plus the ultra-religious who want to continue to be sponsored, plus a premier who wants to remain out of prison. That is our government. Now, this government goes to work. It is sworn into office in January this year, 7 months ago, and it starts working. It does not work for the citizens, as you might imagine. It starts working as it deems fit. And what does it do? It starts a blitz of legislation to pass laws that have one purpose: to assert as much as power, to ensure that government has unlimited power, and that unlimited power cannot and will not be reviewed. I.e., meaning no checks and balances, everything is possible, no one is above government, but government is above the law. The Blitz did not go through, and they then changed tactics. Did not go through, by the way, because protesters started to take to the streets, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then they moved to they changed tactics, and the tactic now became, we will pass these laws piecemeal. And this is what they're doing now. What are these laws? I'm just going to give you a glimpse, because there are 150 laws on, waiting to be decided, okay, voted. Now remember, government basically controls parliament, so they will be voted into law. I'll give you a glimpse of these laws. They want to have full control of the election of judges. So judges will no longer be independent, they will be politicized. The police force will come under the purview of one minister, not accountable to a system, but to one person. The police Department of Internal Investigation, which is run by the Ministry of Justice, will be consolidated into under the same ministry of the police. So the whole police will be politicized, with no control, with no investigation, will be accountable only to one person, a political police. What else are they trying to do? They want to ensure that the security forces will be able to spy against citizens, with a focus on teachers, to make sure that the teachers are transmitting the right messages to the pupils. They want to pass racist laws, and racist against the Arabs, which form 20% of society, okay, against women. They are trying to minimize the rights of women. Now remember, Israel is a country that in the early 1970s had a woman at the helm, okay, a woman premier, Golda Meir. At the same time, in Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken, women did not have right of vote. So The same Israel is now changing courses, and women's rights are being seriously damaged. If this sounds to you as a dictatorship, well, it is a dictatorship in the making. Let me explain to you what happened today. I did not talk to you about two other very important laws that they're trying to pass. One which would have been that there would be no judicial review, and the second law that if there were ever judicial review, that Parliament would be supreme over the court's invalidation. Those are additional laws that they're trying to pass. But today, Parliament voted into law a law that abolishes the doctrine of extreme unreasonableness. Let me explain to you what that means. The courts have a very useful tool to strike down unreasonable, non-rational decisions of a public official, and that is the doctrine of extreme unreasonableness. Without this doctrine, everything becomes reasonable, rational, logical, any decision. So now, Parliament wants to extend elections by another 5 to 10 years. Possible. Government wants to entrench itself for the next 20 to 50 years. Logical. No review. I want to appoint my best friend who is completely incapable to public office. No review. I'm allowed to do so as a minister. No question. What the government is doing, it is essentially establishing a dictatorship, essentially enabling the appointment of incompetent people close to its heart over qualified people who are better suited to do a job. And this passed today into law. Government is supreme above the law. This means there's no longer the rule of law in Israel. Israel does not live according to the rule of law. Okay? That's exactly what happened today. Over the past 7 months, protesters have been committed and have been flocking to the streets. Let me talk to you about 3 measures, countermeasures, that regrettably as of now have all failed but are out there. One is the protesters that I just mentioned. Just so you understand what who these protesters are. In February, these protesters were people in their mid-70s and mid-80s, okay, from I would say 70 to 85. Gradually, the age came down. Today, the heavy lifting of the protests are people between the age of 35 to 55, many above, many below. But that is the main age group. This is a very mature protest. This is a very, I would say, well thought, mature, intelligent reaction. The numbers are also very impressive. I can give you any number you want, but if I would tell you that we have between 400 and 700,000 people in the streets week in, week out, I don't know really what that means. I do not know where you live. But think of 5 to 8% of the population in your country, okay? Whatever that figure means, think that that number is out there in the streets week in, week out. It's not only who the protesters are, it's not only their numbers that is important, but also the tenacity of the protests. Week in, week out, 30 weeks, twice to 3 times a week, people are out there protesting. And guess what? The government is set to turn Israel into a dictatorship and is not listening. The second countermeasure are the professionals. All academic institutions, universities, the Weizmann Institute, are dead against and have been warning government that This will hamper free thinking. This will kill academia. This will diminish our success in the scientific field, in the field of literature and art. Again, nobody cares. Remember, who's that government? Right? The ignoramus, the messianics, who do not care about this. The ultra-religious, who, again, that doesn't means nothing to them. Religious studies, that's what's important. And a premier who is only concerned with remaining free outside of prison. We have all the former chiefs of staff, military chiefs of staff, former police chiefs of staff, former Mossad, heads of Mossad and security forces that have been warning the government that this is a real catastrophe, a true and present danger. But guess what? They don't care. God is with us, according to the Messianics, according to the ultra-religious, and probably also according to Netanyahu's group. The economists and the businessmen have been explaining and demonstrating, including the Ministry of Finance, how harmful this is to the country. But guess what? No one cares. The fact that foreign direct investments have plummeted by 80% over last year is of no concern. The Messianics, according to them, God's with us. He'll replenish the coffers of the country. Taxes, that's not an issue. Productivity, that's not a problem. The ultra-religious never work, so they really don't know what that means to work and to pay taxes and to fund this project that is called a country. And Netanyahu, he is not concerned in the least. We also have external professionals that have been warning the government. The rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's, have warned Netanyahu personally that this would seriously harm the country's rating. The country's rating being harmed, the cost of capital is much higher, not good for our economy. But he doesn't care. He actually does not believe that they understand what's going on here. Those were his words. Another external professional who voiced his opinion about 2 weeks ago was President Biden, who basically called Netanyahu to stop this crazy legislation. But again, Netanyahu completely changed things and believes that Biden has no idea what he's talking about, and he did not convey that message. It so happened that President Biden came out yesterday and, in very simple words, stated that Israel is in a catastrophic security system, in a security situation. We are extremely vulnerable, and he urged Netanyahu to stop these non-democratic laws coming into play, and even that did not help. So Netanyahu has not been listening to the people, has not been listening to all the professionals, advisors, and experts from within, some of which he actually appointed in his previous administration, nor to the professionals from without, which completely discards their opinions. The third countermeasure we have here are the reservists. Remember, I told you that the military, might have not told you that, but the military is extremely important here in Israel. Okay, every 18-year-old boy and girl have to serve between 2 and 3 years, many more. I personally served 4 years, but now I have friends who serve 5, 6, or even 10 years. More importantly, after we are discharged, we have to serve reserve duty, and it is these reservists, that are coming now to their commanders and stating, we will not serve. We are not here to serve a dictatorship. Okay? Remember, we all pledged our allegiances when we were drafted to keep this country safe from our enemies from without, and to keep this country free. No one ever imagined that this would mean free from within. And the situation is so worrying today that tens of thousands of reservists are flocking to state, we will not serve. We will not serve a dictator. We will serve a democratic state. And yes, this is creating a security dilemma here in Israel. Regrettably, Netanyahu and his cabinet completely ignored this, despite all the warning signs that were out there by the reservists, by the professionals, and by the people at large. And today, they passed the law that makes them supreme over the rule of law. I will leave you with one thought, okay? We all say, well, this can never happen. This is something that always happens, in countries that we never even want to go visit, we never care about, or, in ancient history, or maybe not that ancient history. But what we're seeing here is that things can happen at an alarming, rapid pace. Within months, a free-thinking democracy can turn into a dictatorship. And I want to leave you with this thought. What would you do if it were to happen in your country? Would you tell your wife or husband, let's pack and take the kids and move elsewhere? That is possible. Would you stand fight? Really fight? Would you put your position or your company or your job on the back burner and commit to the streets as tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands have been doing these last few months? Think what you would be willing to contribute to the struggle for a free country, for you to continue living freely in your own country without having